welcome to the Pick and Roll podcast. And today I've got a good one for you guys. So basically today, like I introed last week, is going to be the breakdown of my 2021 NBA draft big board. This is when Chris and I were doing the Pick and Roll podcast. So yeah, this is going to be review, basically checking out what I may have gotten wrong or right about my first ever big board, see how the players are doing, and see what, lessons could be learned from things that I either got correct or wrong about in these mocks and this big board. Alrighty, let's go ahead and kick it to the number one player on my big board, which was Jalen Green. I viewed him as a generational shooting guard talent. I thought he was a number one draft pick talent. I thought that he could be a lot like Zach LaVine, and that when he grew into his body frame, he would be able to finish at the rim better like Zach LaVine. Unlocked like 4 or 5 years into his career because he came into the NBA with a really small frame as well. So I still feel pretty confident about that comp. It's just, again, like it took a few years for Zach LaVine to put it together. I think I'll take a Jalen Green a few years to put it together. Body frame wise to finish at the rim and be more efficient. But right now, this is about 3 years into his career. He's averaging 19.6 points per game, 5.2 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 42% field goal percentage, 33% three-point percentage. Jalen Green is definitely a very highly athletic finish at the rim, three-point shot creating. He has so much high upside just because his athletic gifts are just so hard to find. But he definitely has, definitely more room to grow. Last year, he was at a similar points per game mark. I think he was actually averaging 22 a game or something like that. And Jalen Green was affected by Alperen Sengun's growth this year. And I think that those two still kind of haven't figured out how to play with each other and, be the best players they can be together. So I definitely feel like as they grow, playing with each other and playing next to each other, with time, I think it'll definitely improve, both of their abilities. And, the Houston Rockets have so much high upside because, they have such a good team, young team. They were almost made the playoffs. Jalen Green's kind of learning how to play with that group and grow his game at the same time. So, I do think Jalen Green still has a really high upside. I still think, if out of this draft class, he'll definitely still be top 5 best players, I think, in the future. And it's just he still hasn't really grown into his full body frame yet. So we just haven't seen the best of him yet. So, no. Alrighty, let's get to the number 2 guy on my big board, which was Cade Cunningham. I viewed him as a number 1 draft pick talent. I viewed him as a really, you could call him slow in a general sense, but his height definitely 6'7", 6'8". I think he actually measured in at the combine at 6'8", which is pretty crazy. I remember that. And he's so tall, long, shot creating. I didn't think that he was going to be the next Luka Doncic. Like most people were making that comparison and calling him a generational talent. I didn't personally see that. I thought he would be a little bit below that, but still be a very, very good player. Cade Cunningham's definitely been that. He's 3 years into his career. He was drafted number 1 overall. He's averaging 22 points per game, 4.3 rebounds, 7.5 assists, 44% field goal percentage, 35% three-point percentage. In this draft class, he still probably has the highest upside. You could definitely be like a 28-9 guy. I could definitely see that. He's definitely going to be the face of Detroit's franchise for the next 10 years, as long as they retain him. But yeah, Cade Cunningham looks like a leader as well, a good passer. Cade Cunningham's done so well in the NBA. He's definitely going to continue to do well. He is definitely worth the number 1 draft pick for sure. Alrighty. The number 30 guy ranked on my big board is Jonathan Kuminga. I was really high in his athletic gifts, and he was the 7th pick by the Golden State Warriors. I was really high in his athletic gifts. Really, in the G League, he showed a lot more mid-range shot creation than he showed in the Golden State Warriors so far. He's only starting to show it just a little bit throughout this last season to the Golden State Warriors. But, he has a high upside. He definitely needs to continue working on his three-point shot because that was a weakness coming out of the G League. I think it was like pretty abysmal. His shooting splits were pretty poor coming out of the G League, but he's a great athlete, great defender. Last year he averaged 16.1 points per game, 4.8 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 52% field goal percentage, and 32% three-point percentage. I definitely feel like for the next, once Steph, Clay, Draymond leave the Warriors, he's the next guy. Like, he'll be the face of the franchise for a few years for them, I think, unless they hit on some other young draft picks. But they're kind of in an odd spot where they're not going to get a ton of lottery picks. So if I'm the Golden State Warriors, I don't move on off basically one of the few young assets that I have. I definitely feel like he has a high upside. Could definitely be like a 25 point per game scorer. But, he's at a point in time where he's got to make a skill outside of just driving to the rim that he can rely on. And, in the G League, it looked like it was going to be a mid-range shot creation, so that could definitely be the thing that he just naturally grows into with time. Alrighty, the number 4 ranked guy on my big board was Evan Mobley. I definitely saw him being such a great defender. He's definitely one of the better defenders I've scouted. He definitely had really intriguing shot creation off the handle and, really smooth feet, and finishing at the rim was really interesting. Definitely could be a solid standstill 3-point shooter, and the shot creation off the handle wasn't like super polished, but there is a lot of high upside there offensively. Me personally, I was really worried about him playing the center position because I thought his body frame was too raw. I obviously was wrong about that in the general sense of like, I should have just been like, oh, power forward, right? You know what I mean? I even wrote there at the bottom, like, oh, his best way to like actually develop his skill set was try to like pattern his game after Anthony Davis, because if he could be like a power forward until he grows into his body frame, he'll be fine, right? And I should have seen, him as a power forward allows you to be an incredible defensive team like the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, Evan Mobley and Jared Allen really allows them to be as good of a defensive team that they currently are. And, that also with his shot creation and things of that nature, it allows him to play against smaller players while he's playing at the power forward position and kind of expose them as well. So it was his real positional fit. Long term, can he be a center? Sure. Like 4 or 5 years into his career, as he grows into his body frame even more. And, I definitely feel like I got that thought process and vision incorrect. So, but, right now he was the 3rd pick in the draft, averaging 15.7 points per game, 9.4 points, 3.2 assists, 58% field goal percentage, and 37% three-point percentage. His three-point shot has definitely come a long way this year. He definitely still has flashes of really interesting shot creation for his game. And whenever it clicks, the Cavs are going to be so tough, because if he can kick it to like 20 a game, be like their 3rd scorer and be really efficient. I'm not even asking for like 25, but if you have 20 point per game scorer next to Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, it'd be really interesting long term, because, man, they play good defense because of him and Jared Allen. So he's on a really good team, and he's a really important player in the NBA, and he's definitely defensively everything anybody thought he could be, because the man's the real deal defensively. The number 5 ranked guy on my big board was James Bouknight. I really loved his shot creation ability off the dribble. I really was in love with it. I really thought that was really going to translate to the NBA, because I thought he reminded me of CJ McCollum. He's obviously not hit that. He was the 11th pick in the draft, 3.6 assists, 0.6 rebounds, 0.4 assists a game, 43% field goal percentage, 43% three-point percentage. This guy's definitely a bust. It's looking like that so far. And I was definitely wrong about James Bouknight. And yeah, I hopefully, because I only watched highlights back then, hopefully if I watched full games, I would have seen different things. But, in the highlights that I did see, he honestly reminded me of CJ McCollum. And I was definitely wrong about that, for sure. Alrighty, let's go ahead and go from one person I was wrong about to the next one. Davion Mitchell. I had him 6th on my big board. He was 6'1", which did worry me a little bit, but should have worried me a little more. His highlight tape had so many deep 3-point shot creation from the 3-point line, and his shooting splits at Baylor weren't that bad, and his obvious defensive gifts was really good. So I was really, thought really highly of him. He was the 9th pick in the draft, so he was the least, pretty close to where I had him on my big board. And, average this year is averaging 5.3 points per game, 1.3 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 45% field goal percentage, 36% 3-point percentage. I mean, first off, did he get drafted to a terrible fit? Yes. I mean, getting drafted to Sacramento when they already have De'Aaron Fox was a terrible idea. He needed to be a point guard, even though he's a great defender on ball. He's only 6'1". You'd only want to guard in guards because even though he's a good defender, he's guarding 6'5", 6'6", 2 guards that's going to shoot over him. So, Donovan Mitchell is somebody that was drafted in a terrible position, but we can all be honest about the fact that his deep 3-point shot creation just did not translate from Baylor to the NBA. And, without that skill set, he doesn't really have much else to really lean on to really, put points on the board. And because of that, he was a bust. Definitely for the 9th pick. And definitely for the 6th guy on my big board. The number 7th guy on the big board was Kai Jones. Man, I bought into the athletic gift so bad. I really did. This is probably one of the better athletes I've seen. 6'10", athletic. He flashed some handle at Texas. I thought he could be a 3-point shooting power forward that could handle to the rim, and it's with his athletic gifts finish at the rim. I was totally wrong about that. Man, was I wrong about that. And I definitely feel like in the NBA, I definitely felt like he definitely did not meet this potential whatsoever. I don't know if he's more focused on TikTok dances than the NBA. I don't know. He was the 19th pick, so he's even way lower than he was on my big board drafted wise. And he averaged 3.4 points per game, 2.7 rebounds, 0.3 assists, and 55% field goal percentage, 21% 3-point percentage. His most recent stats. And I definitely feel like, the lesson taken from this is do not be overly bought into highly athletic guys. This was definitely a lesson learned because it's easy to just look at athleticism and be like, man, so many of the all-time greats have athleticism and skill. You just can't teach those athletic gifts. And it just doesn't translate as well as you think. Not a highly athletic guy that's just not that talented, that, can't play the center position, for example. I definitely feel like Kai Jones could have been, such a better player with his athletic gifts, but this was definitely a lesson learned scouting wise, is to not watch too much of the talent, right? Taking the skill and the talent, you know what I mean? And don't overrate athletic gifts in the NBA, as odd as it sounds, is definitely the best way to put it. Alrighty. The 8th ranked guy that I had way too low was Scotty Barnes. It was the 4th pick. I understood, that he was going to be a really great defender with his length and his defensive gifts coming out of college. Dude looked unreal. Strong body frame, extremely fluid. And, you did see, even in the highlights that I watched of him running the pick and roll and attacking the rim and putting pressure at the rim. But the rest of his game looked really raw. And, I didn't think that, that he would be able to be translating that pick and roll ability and ball handling ability to the NBA. And he's a great lesson, though, because Scotty Barnes is top 3, like this year. Probably this year specifically, he's probably the best player in this draft class. He's the only one that made the All-Star team. Probably edge out Cade Cunningham because he averaged 20 points per game, 19.9. So essentially 20 points per game, 8.2 rebounds, 6.1 assists, 47% field goal percentage, 31% 3-point percentage. So he's just below Cade in scoring, but his defensive gifts definitely allows him to catch up with Cade. And I'll say this about Scotty Barnes is, he's definitely a lesson learned where if you have a draft prospect that can run the pick and roll and be a primary ball handler that can put pressure at the rim and do that on an extremely high field goal percentage, well, then it's more valuable than you really realize because that's the kind of guy that you want to be your number one ball handler. Like, most teams have great point guards that are really good, that can shot create and things of that nature. But, there also is real value to having a guy like Giannis and Scotty Barnes where they have the ball in their hands and they just finish at the rim so well because, again, NBA spacing, it's all about your ability to attack the rim, and make passes to the perimeter and things of that nature. And, Scotty Barnes was the ideal fit to that general thought process and the well-spaced NBA and the pick and roll operating that would allow him to be extremely elite. And, you could definitely make the argument that he could be the best player in the draft class. If I had to rank upsides, he'd definitely be top 3 in this draft class. And I definitely feel like, I was wrong about him. He's definitely one of the first lessons that I learned. I definitely feel like if I were to do it again, I would hopefully have him in the top 5 of my draft, even 4 or 3 in the big board. You know what I mean? And Scotty Barnes was definitely one I was wrong about, but he was a really good lesson. Alrighty. Let's get to the next guy, which is number 9, which is Jalen Suggs. So, he was somebody that was came off as a good defender, showed some flashes of attacking the rim pretty well, but it looked like his 3-point shot creation and mid-range shot creation looked a little raw, and I didn't believe that he would be the next coming of like Jason Kidd. He definitely was somebody that people were very surprised when Toronto drafted Scotty Barnes with Jalen Suggs, because Jalen Suggs was thought of like the number 4th guy forever. So I definitely feel like this year he was the 5th pick by Orlando. This year he's averaging 12.6 points per game, 3.1 rebounds, 2.7 assists, and 47% field goal percentage and 39% three-point percentage. So he is their starting point guard right now. The Magic have a really good team. He definitely looks like he can be a really solid low to mid tier point guard in the NBA. I do feel like having him around 9 on my big board, I don't feel that was very wrong. I feel like that was pretty accurate. Maybe 9, 8, or 7. But I definitely feel like having him as a top 5 pick and me not doing that on the big board was correct. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and kick it to the next guy. Thank goodness. Because Josh Giddey, the first mock that I ever did, was super low, like 17, 18. Thank goodness I moved into the 10 so we can look back at this and be like, well, he wasn't that wrong. So yeah, Josh Giddey was number 10 on my big board. Really unique draft prospect, 6'8" point guard. I definitely saw that. He wasn't very athletically gifted. He had really great finishes at the rim, though. He had an insane layup package. His shooting splits in the NBL weren't amazing, but, him coming in the draft class like right behind LaMelo Ball really allowed him to be like, okay, well, his shooting splits are not that bad, but they're not as bad as LaMelo's coming out of the NBL, and look how good he's been. So, he's ended up being the 6th pick in the NBA draft, 12.3 points per game, 6.4 rebounds, 4.8 assists, 47% field goal percentage, and 33% three-point percentage. So, Josh Giddey is definitely somebody that I should have had higher. I should have had him around 7 or 6 area. Because he's so tall for the point guard position. Like most people are like, oh, I want a 6'6", 6'5" point guard. 6'8" is just so tall, and because of that length, he could definitely finish at the rim with length. So he can really still put pressure at the rim, and his overall passing gifts are just so special. They were so special coming out of the NBL. The dude's a real basketball genius. All right, so the next guy to break down from the big board is ranked at number 11, which is Ziaire Williams. So, this guy's 6'8" small forward. The flashed a lot of really intriguing perimeter shot creation and 3-point shot creation, but he definitely did it very inefficiently coming out of Stanford. Memphis Grizzlies agreed with me because they drafted him with the 10th pick in the draft, but he's definitely not hit what his upside has been at all. He's averaging 8.2 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 39% field goal percentage, 30% three-point percentage. So, this guy is definitely busted so far. He doesn't really look like he's going to ever grow into his gifts. This does happen from time to time with high upside guys as they just bust. And it's looking like he's going to be one of those guys. Alrighty, and the next guy to break down was Keon Johnson, number 12th ranked guy. He got drafted 21st overall. He's 6'5" with an insane vertical. Like, he was really athletically gifted, but he really only had mid-range shot creation. It was really close to the rim, like kind of free throw in-ish. He's right now. I saw some flashes of DeMar DeRozan in him, so I had him. He's averaging 6.2 points per game, 1.4 rebounds, 0.6 assists, 38% field goal percentage, 34% three-point percentage. Again, just like Kai Jones, this is a great lesson of don't get bought into the athletic gifts. Don't get stuck up in the athletic gifts because, the skill was definitely a red flag, right? You know what I mean? And, I have my thought process in drafts is let's not overrate how much skill can develop, right? They are only they usually show flashes of what they could be in college, and don't underrate how little skill can be added with time. Is the best way to put it. And I feel like Keon Johnson's a great example of that. And, definitely somebody that didn't have a ton of skill. So then why was he drafted where he was? Well, it was because you bought into the athletic gifts, like me, and it just wasn't there. Alrighty, so the next guy to break down is the 13th ranked big guy on my big board, which is Cam Thomas. I definitely understood why everybody else was low on him because people thought 6'3" and shot creating guy, not overly athletic. But me personally, I saw what I really loved about him was the footwork and the shot creation quality. I mean, this guy at LSU was just insanely skilled mid-range and 3-point shot creation. I mean, it was the real deal. He really had it. He definitely showed flashes of what he ended up becoming, which is the oh my goodness from the draft class. Because the man last year averaged 22.5 points per game, 3.2 rebounds, 2.9 assists, 44% field goal percentage, 36% 3-point percentage. And he's probably the face of the Brooklyn Nets franchise. When you think about it, people think Mikal Bridges first. But for the next 5 years, yeah, definitely Cam Thomas. He got drafted 27th overall, so it's definitely more right than the NBA was about Cam Thomas. This is definitely a skill pick, and people really have to, learn how to draft slow and skilled. And this was the first one that I got right. And this is, Cam Thomas has done a heck of a job. He is the real deal bucket wise, and he is what in the NBA what he looked like in LSU. He superior shot creation skill that allows him to use that 6-foot frame, which he has put a lot of muscle onto, to create space and get these shots off. And the Cam Thomas is the real deal, man. He is the real deal, and he thinks he's the real deal. He has the right mentality for it as well. All right, the next guy to break down is number 14 on my big board, which is Nah'Shon Bones Hyland. So, this guy had a really great 3-point shot creation, deep 3-point shot creation at VCU. 6'3", flashed some ability to get to the rim as well. He was a smaller guy for the shooting guard position, but he did measure with a 6'9" wingspan, so I did think he was going to be able to guard the shooting guard position. So far in the league, he had a peak with the Denver was averaging 12 points per game coming off the bench. It made all rookie team, but since he's gotten traded to the Clippers, he's been really poor. It's 26th pick in the draft. He's averaged 6.9 points per game, 1.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 38% field goal percentage, 32% 3-point percentage. He's behind James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Eric Gordon, a team that's ready to win now and doesn't really want his shot creation coming off the bench at this moment in time. That's at least what it looks like. They want him as a young developmental piece. He's been very outspoken about being discontent about his situation, which would make sense because, he's just not in a spot where he can show his skill and develop his game as much. So, it looked like year 1 and 2 that I got this correct by how I was doing in Denver, but, either he moves to a different spot or we're not going to know for 4 years if he's going to be worth the 14th guy on the big board because, it's going to take time because if the Clippers are going to retain James Harden, Russell Westbrook on that core, then he's not going to just get much minutes because those guys are just so good right now, ready to win right now for the playoffs. Alrighty, the next guy to break down on my big board was Jared Butler. He was the other point guard from Baylor. He, showed flashes of shot creation, 3-point line, mid-range, and finishing at the rim. He ended up being the 40th pick averaging 6.3 points per game, 1.5 assists, 1.5 rebounds, 3.2 assists, 48% field goal percentage, 30% three-point percentage. Man, did I get this wrong. Jared Butler's definitely not worth the 15th pick. Hopefully, if I would have watched full games like I do now of players like him, I would have seen those things. But yeah, he definitely did not hit on the 15th guy in big board. I definitely got that wrong. All right, so the next guy to break down is Franz Wagner, guy and ranked on my big board. He definitely showed some 3-point, pull up shots, and he was running pick and rolls at Michigan. That's like the main ball handler. I personally didn't think that was going to translate to the NBA, so I had him really low on the board. Obviously, I was really wrong about Franz. He's much more skilled than I gave him credit for coming out of Michigan. He's averaging 19.7 points per game, 5.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 48% field goal percentage, 28.1% three-point percentage. He was the 8th pick of the draft. Franz Wagner, man, I got that really wrong. He is definitely a lesson in pick and roll, operating forwards and their skill sets. And I was definitely wrong about Franz. And the next guy to break down is Corey Kispert. Corey Kispert was the 17th ranked guy in mid-big board. He was ended up being the 15th draft pick. He's definitely a really good three-point shooter coming out of Gonzaga, 6'6", moved off ball well, showed some flashes of driving to the rim and finishing. He's been a decent role player for the Washington Wizards, averaging 13.4 points per game, 2.8 rebounds, 2 assists, 40% field goal percentage, 38% three-point percentage, but he doesn't have a super high upside. All right, the next guy to break down on the big board is number 18, Usman Garuba. So I had him. I really thought that he was going to be a lot like Draymond Green. I really thought that his defensive abilities from Real Madrid was going to translate to the NBA. The Houston Rockets did think similarly because they drafted the 23rd pick in the draft. But he's definitely busted 20.5 points, 1.2 rebounds, 0.02 assists, 16% field goal percentage, and 0% three-point percentage. He's definitely been a bust from this draft. Next guy up on my big board was Isaiah Jackson, around 6'10". He looked like a guy that was going to be a small ball center coming out of Kentucky. He definitely has not translated into the NBA as a whole. He was a 22nd pick in the draft, 6.4 points, 4 rebounds, 0.8 assists, 66% field goal percentage, 0% three-point percentage. Isaiah Jackson was definitely somebody that was viewed as a small ball center, and that era is kind of dying out as like the 6'10" guy having a ton of hype. And I definitely feel like he was a guy that was caught in an era where it's kind of going back to taller centers. Alrighty, so we're just gonna go ahead and only break down the top 20 of the big board. Trey Murphy. He's one of those upper class in the NBA draft, 6'9", with a really good 7-foot wingspan. He looked like he really could defend really well and stand still 3-point shot really well, and drive to the rim really well. And he's definitely translated those gifts to being a really elite 3-and-D wing in the NBA. He was the 17th pick by the Pelicans, averaging 14.8 points per game, 4.9 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 44% field goal percentage, 36% three-point percentage. And he's probably the ideal 3-and-D wing prospect that has come out in the last few years. He definitely is a perfect fit for that role, and he's really the ideal player for that role that's come out. So yeah, he's the real deal, Trey Murphy.
All right, the next person to break down the 21st ranked guy on my big board was Chris Duarte. This guy ended up being the 13th pick in the draft. He was a senior. He was somebody that moved really well off ball, showed some flashes of shot creation off the dribble. I did write that if he had that skill set at that 6'6" length or 6'5" length coming out of college, that he would have been top 14 pick. He ended up getting the 13th pick in the draft by the Pacers. He's definitely looked like a bust so far this year. He's averaged 3.9 points per game, 2.8 rebounds, 0.7 assists, 38% field goal percentage, and 34% three-point percentage. The next person to break down is Jalen Johnson. Was the 22nd ranked guy on my big board. He was 6'8". He quit Duke after like 6 games played, so there's a lot of character questions and overall questions about his game and skill set translating to the NBA. He ended up being the 22nd pick by the Atlanta Hawks, and he's really been playing so well. He's averaging 16 points per game, 8.7 rebounds, 3.6 assists, 51% field goal percentage, 35% three-point percentage. He was definitely raw, and he definitely saw flashes of him attacking the rim and making passes out of those situations, but everything looked really raw at that time. I definitely feel like if there is a lesson is if you're going to take a shot on a boom or bust guy, you probably rather take it on a small forward than a guard because they'll always have the height advantage, and he always did have pretty decent athletic gifts as well. So Jalen Johnson's definitely worked out. The next guy to break down was 23rd on my big board, which was Moses Moody. I was lower on him than everybody else coming out. I understand he was 6'6" with a 7'1" wingspan, had some 3-point shooting ability, and could come off ball and things of that nature. And I just personally didn't really see it that much. He was the 14th pick by the Golden State Warriors. He's averaging 8.1 points per game, 3 rebounds, 0.9 assists, 46% field goal percentage, and 36% three-point percentage. He's definitely has not been playing like the 14th pick in the draft. He's definitely been somebody that's in like the low 20s or high teens, 19, 18 of like the best players out of this draft class. But he's definitely was not worth the 14th pick, so I was probably more so right about this guy. The next guy to go over is Neemias Queta. He was a junior from Utah State that I really liked as a shot blocker and thought that he would be a shot blocker in the NBA and at least be a backup center. He's the 39th pick in the draft. He is averaging 5.5 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, 0.7 assists, a 64% field goal percentage, and 3% three-point percentage. 0% three-point percentage, much bad. He's actually coming off the bench for the Boston Celtics right now, so there's a chance that this guy's going to have a ring, which is interesting. And I guess so far his career arc is working better than the 39th pick, so this may be correct. We'll see. We'll give it some more time, but so far it's been impressive how long he stayed in the league. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get the next guy, which is my 25th ranked guy, which is Trey Mann. He's definitely had some flashes, some three-point shot creation. Everything was a little raw coming out of Florida. He was also 6'4", not really a great athlete, so there are some things that you could definitely be holes in his game that I saw coming out of Florida. He got drafted the 18th pick in the draft. Right now he's averaging 11.9 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 5.2 assists, 45% field goal percentage, and 36% three-point percentage. He's having a really good season this year, and definitely going to be really interesting to see how he grows. I was definitely wrong about him, the 18th pick, because it was a really good spot for the Thunder. Already. The next guy to talk about is 26th ranked guy, which was Josh Christopher. He was a really highly touted guy coming out of high school that I just wasn't really big on. He ended up being the 24th pick. He's not really in the NBA right now. He's definitely somebody that's a really good proof of just don't buy into the high school hype. Just because somebody's good at coming out of high school means absolutely nothing. Josh Christopher is a great example of that. Alrighty, time to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, the guy that I got wrong and most people got wrong. Alperen Sengun, 27th ranked guy. Coming out, I thought 6'10", not a good athlete. I didn't think he would be able to defend well. I didn't think his offensive skill outside of extremely great post footwork would translate. Man, have I been proven wrong. He was drafted 16th overall. The Houston Rockets actually traded up to draft him, so they probably had him higher on their big board than the 16th pick to warrant them trading up for him. He's averaging 21 points per game, 9.3 rebounds, 5 assists, 53% field goal percentage, 29.7% three percentage. Again, like I've talked about with the current draft and Kyle Filipowski, he's a great lesson that I've learned about slow skilled centers having those passing abilities and how valuable and translatable that skill set, specifically speaking, is to the NBA. And Alperen Sengun's one that I definitely got wrong. Already, 28th guy is Sharife Cooper. A lot of people were really high on him. He went to the 48th pick in the draft. He's not in the NBA right now. He was also a highly touted guy coming out of high school. 3-point shot was really poor at 22%. That's the reason why it's not really translating for him for Sharife Cooper. He's not really an NBA guy. And, even I had him too high at the 20th pick, but most mock drafts had him much higher than where I have him. The next guy is Isaiah Todd. About a 6'10" guy coming out of the G League that year who shoot threes really well. He was the 31st pick, but he's not in the NBA right now. He's still in the G League. I think the Bucks own his rights right now, so it's going to be interesting if long term they're going to be able to bring him in. But yeah, right now it's not looking too great. All right, so the 30th ranked guy on my big board is Quentin Grimes. He's the 25th pick in the draft. He had some really nice shot creation on the dribble. He was like a junior or senior, if I remember correctly, coming out of Houston. 7.3 points a game, 2 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 39% field goal percentage, 36% three-point percentage. He's a pretty decent bench guard for the Knicks, but since they've added Dante DiVincenzo, he just hasn't been getting as many minutes. So, he's a guy that may be fading out of the NBA. It's a little early to tell, but yeah. And I don't really have that many guys to talk about in the second round. The only guy that's like really interesting that I feel like I want to talk about is number 40 ranked for me was Herb Jones. He was the 35th pick. He's a great example of a really ideal senior D and wing, like coming out of Alabama. This guy was really looked like a really elite defender and shot 35% of the 3-point line. You know what I mean? Like he's because a lot of 3-and-D prospects that get drafted in drafts are thought of as we'll draft an 18 or 19-year-old, and if their skill set doesn't develop, they'll be a 3-and-D guy. Right? There's no guarantee that they're going to be a 3-and-D guy. A good example of that is B.J. Boston. B.J. Boston was the 32nd ranked guy on my big board. He was drafted 51 first overall. But a lot of teams hope, if he's not going to be able to, grow into a B.J. Boston skill set coming out of high school, one day he's going to be a 3-and-D guy once he grows into his body frame. There's just not as much guarantee. And, not everybody can be a good defender. Even if some people have the body frame to be good defenders, some of them don't want to be. Some of them can't coach to be. Some of them, it's a tough niche basketball thought process and players that are defensive specialists that bring it on the defensive end. But, NBA GMs and franchises are looking to bring those guys off a bench, specifically speaking. So, I definitely feel like, Herb Jones is a perfect example of I'd much rather have as an ideal 6th or 7th guy coming off the bench, a senior that can defend like that and, be that kind of 3-and-D guy that has the athleticism, has the frame, that can be a Herb Jones and do well in the NBA. And Herb Jones is definitely an example of that prototype that I really, really genuinely like. A really good example of that this year is Jalen Bridges for Baylor, where he's got the athleticus, 6'9", she's 40% from the 3-point line, defends really well in ball, really flashes those skill sets, looks committed to the defensive end. That's the ideal senior type of guy, and the real prototype for that kind of thought process and guys that are successful in the NBA is definitely Herb Jones. It's definitely a lesson I have from that draft class. And if I had to redo it, I definitely would have had him higher than 40. So yeah, this is going to be the end of the breakdown of 3 years ago. Basically, next week, we got a really interesting podcast where it's going to be strengths and weaknesses of this current draft class. And it's going to be really fun. Really looking forward to making it for you guys. And this is going to be the end of the podcast. I really appreciate anybody that's listening. Hopefully you guys all have a great week.